The earth groaned, a deep guttural rumble that tore through the ancient land. It wasn't the distant thunder of a coming storm, nor the defiant roar of a lion challenging its territory. This was a sound of primal chaos, a violent awakening from the very bedrock beneath. In an instant, the world inverted. Dust, thick and suffocating, billowed into the sapphire sky, transforming the vibrant African afternoon into a choking haze of gray despair. Homes, traditionally built from local materials, crumbled like sandcastles under a relentless tide, their fragile structures yielding to the unimaginable force. A symphony of destruction erupted. Timbers splintered, mud bricks disintegrated, and the terrified cries of people and animals mingled in a cacophony of fear and pain. Through the settling dust, one could discern the twisted skeletons of what were once bustling market stalls, now an indistinguishable jumble of debris, and the grotesque, fractured shapes of larger buildings, their roofs collapsed inward like broken wings. The ground continued to shudder intermittently, each aftershock sending fresh waves of terror through the survivors, ensuring that the nightmare was far from over. This remote village, nestled deep within the verdant heart of Africa, had been utterly devastated in a matter of terrifying seconds, swallowed by the insatiable maw of a catastrophic earthquake. Before this cataclysmic event, the landscape had been a canvas of breathtaking beauty and untamed majesty. Rolling savannas stretched endlessly under an immense sky, dotted with acacia trees whose flat tops resembled nature's own parasols. Rivers, swollen from recent rains, snaked through the plains, their banks teeming with life. Days were defined by the rhythmic hum of insects, the chirping of exotic birds, and the occasional thrilling glimpse of Africa's iconic wildlife. Here, leopards moved like liquid shadows, their rosettes camouflaging them perfectly against the dappled light filtering through dense bush. They were the silent sovereigns of this domain, their elusive nature contributing to their mystique and their importance in the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Just miles from the now shattered village, immersed in this wild splendor, was Dr. Evelyn Reed, an American wildlife conservationist. Her sun-kissed hair was often tied back beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her keen blue eyes constantly scanning the horizon, searching for telltale signs of her beloved big cats. Evelyn was not merely a researcher, she was an advocate, a protector, her heart intricately woven into the fate of these magnificent creatures. Her particular passion lay with the leopards, a species she had dedicated years to studying, understanding their complex social structures and territorial behaviors. Beside her, a steadfast presence was Marcus, a local guide and tracker whose knowledge of the land was as vast as the sky above them. His weathered face was a map of countless sunrises and sunsets, his hands calloused from years spent navigating the bush. Together, they were diligently tracking a specific mother leopard, one Evelyn felt a particularly strong connection to, having monitored her for seasons. Suddenly, the familiar solidity of the earth beneath them betrayed its nature. It began as a low thrum, then escalated to a violent shudder that threw them off balance. Evelyn gasped, gripping Marcus's arm as the ground bucked and rolled like a tormented beast. Trees around them swayed wildly, their branches thrashing as if in a desperate dance. A distant, horrifying roar reached their ears. Not an animal, but the sound of something tearing apart, something massive and man-made, followed by a chorus of screams that chilled Evelyn to her core. The sheer force of the tremor made coherent thought difficult, but as the first powerful wave of shaking subsided, Evelyn's mind snapped to one immediate, overwhelming concern: the animals. Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, for the mother leopard she had been tracking, for her cubs, for all the vulnerable creatures now caught in an unimaginable catastrophe. She knew this particular mother had recently made a den. As Dr. Evelyn Reed and Marcus brace themselves for what comes next, remember to hit that subscribe button to follow this incredible story of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and wildlife. The journey has only just begun. The Earth's violent shudder finally subsided, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake, a stark contrast to the terrifying cacophony just moments before. Evelyn pushed herself up, her limbs aching but miraculously unbroken. Beside her, Marcus was already on his feet, his eyes scanning their immediate surroundings with a practiced urgency. Their small camp, nestled precariously on a rocky outcrop overlooking a dry riverbed, was a scene of disarray. Tents lay shredded, their poles twisted like pretzels, and supplies were scattered, some swept away by small, localized landslides. Dust motes danced in the fractured light, filtering through the canopy, remnants of the cataclysm. "Are you all right, Evelyn?" Marcus's voice was rough with concern, his gaze lingering on a deep gash on her arm she hadn't even noticed. "Shaken, but fine," she managed, her voice feeling alien in her own throat. "What about you?" He nodded, a grin set to his jaw. "A few scrapes. But the village, it must be worse." His words hung heavy in the air, a terrifying premonition. Their camp was a kilometer or so from the small, vibrant community they occasionally visited for supplies and local insights. The thought of that peaceful place, now potentially reduced to rubble, sent a fresh wave of dread through Evelyn. Her primary human instinct was to rush to the village, to offer what little help they could. But another, deeper instinct pulled at her. An almost primal concern for the creatures she devoted her life to studying. "The animals, Marcus," she said, her voice laced with a desperate urgency. "Many will be displaced, injured. And the mother leopard." Her den site was so close to the village. Marcus understood immediately. He knew her connection to this particular leopard, a magnificent female Evelyn had been tracking for months, documenting her hunting patterns and, more recently, her new litter of cubs. It was a well-known, albeit tragic, phenomenon that seismic activity often sent many wild animals, particularly those with young, scattering towards what they perceived as safer ground, sometimes dangerously close to human settlements. They would burrow into crevices, under stable overhangs, or even seek shelter within the relative cover of village structures. Despite their own injuries and the immediate need to secure their camp, the unspoken decision was made. They had to assess the damage in the village, yes, but also to look for signs of the wildlife caught in the disaster. Their journey began, a grueling trek through a landscape utterly transformed. Familiar trails were obliterated, replaced by treacherous fissures and mounds of debris. The air was thick with the scent of pulverized earth and, more ominously, something metallic and acrid. They navigated fallen trees that now lay like skeletal giants, their branches clawing at the sky. They saw displaced animals, small rodents scurrying in bewilderment, a few startled antelope darting away, their usual grace replaced by an almost panicked urgency. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made them flinch, their senses heightened to an unbearable degree. As they drew closer to the village, the scale of the devastation became horrifyingly clear. What had once been a cluster of sturdy mud brick homes and communal areas was now a chaotic mess of collapsed roofs, splintered timber, and dust-shrouded wreckage. The sounds were overwhelming. The low moans of injured people, the desperate cries for help, the frantic shouts of those digging through the debris. The task of rescue seemed monumental, an impossible undertaking for so few hands. Evelyn felt a surge of helplessness, her heart aching for the suffering she witnessed. They began to move through the ruins, their eyes darting, searching for any sign of life, human or animal. The air was heavy with despair, but amidst the chaos, Marcus suddenly froze. His keen eyes, honed by years of tracking, caught a subtle movement, a flicker of something out of place beneath a massive, fractured slab of concrete that had once been part of a community building. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the din. "Look." He pointed, his finger trembling slightly. Evelyn followed his gaze. At first, she saw nothing but shadow and dust. Then, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift. Not human. Something small. Something feline. A jolt went through her. The mother leopard's den site. It had been rumored to be in this very section of the village, a secluded spot beneath an old, abandoned granary. The granary, she now realized with a sickening lurch, was precisely where that concrete slab had fallen. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The cub, a small, precious life. The urgency became a tangible weight, pressing down on them both. Evelyn and Marcus cautiously approached the monstrous slab of shattered concrete, a jagged scar on the devastated landscape. The once vibrant village home had been reduced to an indistinguishable pile of rubble, and from beneath a particularly ominous shadow, a faint, almost inaudible whimpering sound drifted on the dust-laden air. It was barely more than a sigh, a soft, pitiful tremor of desperation, but to Evelyn's trained ear, it was unmistakably animal. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm matching the urgency that now consumed her. They knelt, carefully peering into the narrow, dark crevice created by the precarious angle of the collapsed structure. Through the gloom, a tiny, indistinct form struggled to be seen. As their eyes adjusted, the form resolved itself. A leopard cub, no larger than a house cat, its sleek, spotted coat caked with dust and grim grime. Its small, round eyes were closed, not in peaceful slumber, but in profound distress, perhaps even unconsciousness. A fresh wave of panic seized Evelyn. The whimper now seemed weaker, a plea for help on the very edge of silence. It was clear the cub was barely holding on. Their immediate instinct was to move the obstacle, to free the trapped creature. They pushed and pulled at the edges of the concrete slab, their muscles straining against its immense, unyielding weight. Each effort was met with stubborn resistance. The rubble shifted an inch, then settled back with a groan, threatening to collapse further and entomb the cub completely. Frustration gnawed at Evelyn. She pushed harder, her breath hitching, but the task was impossible without proper tools, equipment designed for such a catastrophic weight. Their hands, though strong, were utterly inadequate against the sheer force of the collapsed structure. A profound emotional connection sparked within Evelyn, an almost visceral pang of maternal protectiveness. Seeing the helpless cub, so vulnerable and utterly dependent, magnified her dedication to wildlife 1,000-fold. This wasn't just a research subject. It was a life, fragile and precious, hanging by the thinnest of threads. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to save it, to pull it from the clutches of this horrific disaster. The sight of its closed eyes, the faint tremor of its tiny body, etched themselves onto her soul, fueling a desperate resolve. Marcus, his face grim, placed a reassuring hand on her arm. The mother, she would have been close by, perhaps even sheltering the den here, as they sometimes do near human settlements for safety from other predators, he explained, his voice low and heavy with concern. She would be frantic, but the earthquake, she would have fled the immediate shock, likely thinking the cub was lost. Without her or us, its chances are diminishing quickly. She won't return to this chaos for a lost cub, not if she thinks it's gone. His words, though logical, only amplified the crushing weight of their situation, highlighting the narrow window of time they had. The cub's whimpers, if possible, grew even weaker, barely audible over the distant sounds of human emergency sirens and the wind whistling through the demolished buildings. It was now more of a shuddering breath than a cry, a testament to its fading strength. Time was not only ticking, it was galloping past them, each second a critical loss for the tiny, trapped creature. Evelyn looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with desperation, a silent question hanging in the air between them. What else could they possibly do? The urgency had escalated from critical to an almost unbearable agony. The realization struck Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. They were utterly helpless, two individuals with bare hands against tons of shattered concrete. They couldn't move it, not alone. Their only hope, a slim one at best, lay with the rescue teams swarming the village, teams primarily focused on human casualties. Leaving the cub felt like a betrayal, a searing pain in her chest, but staying meant watching its life ebb away beneath the impenetrable rubble. "We need help, Marcus," she finally stated, her voice hoarse with unshed tears. "We have to find someone, anyone who can help us lift this." Marcus nodded grimly, already understanding the monumental task ahead. Navigating the chaotic aftermath of the earthquake was a challenge in itself. They picked their way through the debris, dodging distraught villagers, overwhelmed medical personnel, and the relentless machinery of rescue. The air was thick with dust, the smell of pulverized concrete and raw earth, punctuated by the faint, agonizing cries of trapped survivors. Every minute they spent trying to explain their dilemma felt like an hour stolen from the fragile cub. Their initial attempts to explain the situation to the various rescue workers they encountered were met with a mixture of polite dismissal and outright impatience. "We're looking for survivors, ma'am," one overwhelmed paramedic mumbled, gesturing helplessly toward a pile of collapsed homes where families were undoubtedly buried. "Human lives are our priority right now." Another rescuer, sweat streaming down his face, simply shook his head, his eyes hollow with fatigue. "We don't have the resources for animals. Every man, every piece of equipment is focused on the people." Evelyn's pleas grew more desperate, her voice cracking with emotion. She tried to convey the urgency, the sheer helplessness of the tiny creature, the responsibility she felt. But against the backdrop of such immense human suffering, her plea for a leopard cub sounded almost trivial, an inconvenient distraction from the true horror unfolding around them. The scale of the human tragedy was a suffocating blanket, making their mission seem selfish, insignificant. It was an obstacle far greater than the concrete slab itself, the burden of prioritization, the agonizing choice between one life and many. Just as despair began to truly set in, threatening to drown her last vestiges of hope, a gruff voice cut through the clamor. "What's all this fuss about a cat?" They turned to see a burly man, his face weathered and tanned, his arms scarred with old wounds, an American flag patch stitched onto his worn rescue jacket. This was John, a seasoned volunteer rescuer with a reputation for being tough but fair, known for appearing in disaster zones across the globe. He'd been barking orders, organizing teams, his presence a force of nature in itself. He had overheard fragments of Evelyn's impassioned, increasingly frantic appeal. John's gaze, initially skeptical, softened almost imperceptibly as Evelyn, with renewed vigor, explained the cub's predicament, painting a vivid picture of its tiny, shivering form beneath the crushing weight. She described its closed eyes, its barely audible whimpers, the fragile hold it had on life. John listened, his expression inscrutable, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed his eyes. Perhaps it was a memory of his own past, of unexpected rescues in unlikely places, of finding hope where none seemed to exist. He'd seen enough despair to recognize the pure, unadulterated passion in Evelyn's voice, a fire that refused to be extinguished. He knew that sometimes, saving even the smallest life could ignite a spark of hope far greater than its physical form. The cub's faint sounds were now almost imperceptible, lost beneath the grinding of heavy equipment and the distant shouts of human rescuers. Evelyn felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The ticking clock had morphed into a countdown, each agonizing second pulling the cub further away, pushing Evelyn to the absolute brink of despair. If they didn't act now, it would be too late. She looked at John, her eyes pleading, silently begging him to see beyond the chaos, to recognize the singular, precious life that hung in the balance. The silent question hanging between Evelyn and Marcus found its answer in the unexpected yet welcome presence of John. Observing Evelyn's unwavering determination, the way her entire being seemed to vibrate with a fierce, almost primal need to save the cub, John saw something beyond a mere animal rescue. He recognized the profound impact this small life had on her, and perhaps more importantly, the potential morale boost such a rare victory could offer to his own weary team amidst the overwhelming human tragedy. A flicker of something akin to understanding, perhaps even admiration, crossed his gruff features. He nodded slowly, a decisive movement that carried more weight than any words. "All right," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "Show me what you've got. Let's see what we're up against." His decision ignited a spark of hope in Evelyn's chest, a tiny flame against the encroaching despair. Together, the three of them meticulously assessed the collapsed concrete, their eyes tracing the jagged edges, the precarious balance of the rubble. John, with his seasoned eye for structural vulnerabilities, pointed out potential leverage points, explaining the inherent dangers of disturbing such an unstable mass. They devised a careful plan, a desperate gamble to free the cub without triggering a further collapse that would seal its fate, or worse, endanger them all. It was a delicate dance between brute force and calculated precision. The immediate challenge was the lack of proper tools. The earthquake had scattered everything, and what little equipment the rescue teams had was dedicated to critical human extractions. Resource gathering became an urgent scavenger hunt. Marcus, with his intimate knowledge of the village, led them to a partially intact shed where they found a rusted crowbar and a few sturdy wooden planks. John, ever resourceful, fashioned rudimentary shims from splintered door frames and a heavy-duty car jack he salvaged from a crushed vehicle nearby. They improvised with what little was available, their ingenuity driven by the cub's fading whimpers. Every piece of debris they moved, every item they collected, felt like a small victory against the overwhelming odds. With their makeshift tools in hand, they began the arduous task. John's expertise with structural collapse proved invaluable. He directed their efforts with calm authority, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. "Slowly, Evelyn. Push down here, not there. Marcus, use that plank as a fulcrum, gently now, just enough to relieve a sliver of pressure." He guided their movements, ensuring that each carefully placed shim, each incremental lift, was executed with maximum efficiency and minimal risk. He explained the dynamics of the weight, how even a small shift in one area could have catastrophic repercussions elsewhere. Evelyn and Marcus worked in sync, their bodies aching, their minds focused solely on the task at hand. Still, setbacks and challenges were inevitable. The immense weight of the concrete seemed actively to resist their efforts, groaning and settling back into place each time they thought they had gained an inch. Dust, thick and suffocating, billowed around them, stinging their eyes and coating their throats. Unstable debris would shift unexpectedly, sending small avalanches of rubble cascading down, narrowly missing their hands or heads. The fear of causing a further, more devastating collapse hung heavy in the air, a constant, chilling reminder of the fragility of their undertaking. Each creak, each groan from the strained concrete sent a jolt of anxiety through them. The most heartbreaking observation, however, was the cub's continued deterioration. Between their efforts, Evelyn would peer into the tiny crevice, her heart sinking with each glance. The cub was barely moving now, its small, spotted form almost entirely still. Its breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. Its life, once vibrant and full of wild promise, was now hanging by the thinnest of threads, fading with every agonizing minute. The urgency they felt was no longer just about rescue. It was a desperate race against time, against the final, irreversible surrender of a tiny, innocent life. The sheer impossibility of moving the vast concrete slab with their bare hands had loomed over them like another oppressive weight. But John's arrival, though initially met with a flicker of skepticism, had brought with it a renewed surge of hope. His seasoned eye, accustomed to structural collapse and the physics of shifting tons of debris, had quickly identified a weakness, a subtle leverage point that Evelyn and Marcus, despite their desperation, had overlooked. Working with a coordinated precision that belied the urgency of the moment, John had directed their efforts, instructing them on where to position their makeshift levers, sturdy wooden beams salvaged from a partially destroyed building, and how to apply their combined strength without compromising the precarious stability of the rest of the wreckage. Evelyn, her face streaked with dust and sweat, pushed with all her might, gritting her teeth against the strain, her focus solely on the fragile life beneath the rubble. Marcus, his muscles bulging, worked in silent synchronicity with John, their movements economical and powerful. Then, with a grinding groan that sent shivers down Evelyn's spine, a small section of the concrete slab shifted. Not much, perhaps only a few inches, but it was enough. A sliver of space, barely wider than Evelyn's arm, opened up directly above where the cub lay. It was their breakthrough, the moment they had been fighting for, a tiny victory against the overwhelming force of the disaster. Dust billowed around them, thick and choking, but Evelyn didn't care. Her eyes were fixed on that opening. "Now, Evelyn," John commanded, his voice gruff but steady. "Quickly but gently. Don't rush it. Any sudden movement could bring it all down." Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm of hope and fear. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Evelyn dropped to her knees, extending her arm into the suffocating darkness of the newly created void. Her fingers, trembling slightly, probed the jagged edges of the concrete, careful not to snag herself or dislodge any loose debris that might fall on the cub. The confined space was tight, oppressive, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of pulverized concrete and old earth. She could feel the rough texture of the fallen material, the cold, unforgiving presence of the structure that had almost become the cub's tomb. Then, her fingertips brushed against something soft, warm, and distinctly furry. A jolt, a surge of adrenaline shot through her. She was so close. Gently, carefully, she maneuvered her hand, trying to get a better grip, a fuller sense of the cub's position. Just as she thought she had it, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch, a faint shudder ran through the fur. It was a glimmer of life, a hopeful spark in the depths of the dust and despair. The cub stirred. A soft, almost inaudible whimper escaped its tiny throat, a fragile sound that was more of a breath than a cry. It was alive. A wave of profound relief washed over Evelyn, so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. "It's moving," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes stinging. "It's alive." With renewed determination, and guided by John's calm instructions to twist her wrist just so, to apply pressure here and release there, Evelyn carefully, painstakingly, worked her fingers around the cub's small, limp body. It was heavier than she expected, and she worried about causing further injury. Each movement was deliberate, slow, and precise. Finally, her fingers secured a gentle but firm hold under its chest and hindquarters. She began to pull, inch by agonizing inch, easing the small, fragile creature towards the light. The cub made no sound, no struggle, its body utterly pliant in her grasp. As its head emerged from the dark maw of the rubble into the muted light of the devastated afternoon, a collective sigh escaped the small rescue team. It was small, incredibly so, and utterly still, its eyes still closed, its breathing shallow and irregular. Its fur, once a vibrant gold, was matted with dust and a faint tracing of what looked like dried blood near its flank. But it was out. It was no longer trapped. Evelyn carefully, almost reverently, laid the cub on a relatively clean patch of ground, away from the immediate debris. She knelt beside it, her hands hovering, afraid to touch too roughly, yet desperate to assess its condition. It was barely breathing, weak and injured, but undeniably alive. A miracle, a tiny, spotted miracle in a world of heartbreak. A moment of profound, almost dizzying relief washed over the trio. No one spoke, but the shared silence was filled with an unspoken triumph, a small, precious victory carved out of the pervasive landscape of loss. This tiny life, pulled from the jaws of chaos, was a beacon of hope, reminding them that even amidst overwhelming devastation, life persisted, and sometimes, with a helping hand, it could even prevail. Evelyn instinctively moved into action, her veterinary training kicking in despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She carefully, almost reverently, placed a hand on the cub's small chest, feeling for the shallow, erratic heartbeat. It was faint but discernible. Its breathing was labored, a soft, raspy sound that tore at her heart. She quickly assessed its overall condition, noting the matted fur, the small trickle of dried blood from a superficial cut on its flank, and the unnatural stillness of its limbs. Her kit, though designed for larger field procedures, contained essentials. She pulled out a small, sterile cloth and gently dabbed at the wound, cleaning it as best she could with antiseptic solution. The cub whimpered softly at the touch, a barely audible protest that was nonetheless a sign of life. She wrapped it in a clean, soft blanket from her pack, trying to conserve its body heat, knowing hypothermia was a silent killer for injured animals. The tiny body felt fragile, almost weightless, in her arms. As Evelyn meticulously attended to the cub, Marcus, ever the scout, ever attuned to the rhythm of the wild, began his own crucial task. He moved with a practiced grace through the wreckage, his eyes scanning the periphery of the devastated village, looking for any sign of the mother leopard. He knew her scent, her patterns, her preferred hunting grounds. Even amidst the chaos, instinct would drive her, either towards her cub or away from the overwhelming human presence. He moved with a quiet urgency, hoping to find her before she gave up hope or moved too far away. The thought of reuniting them was a powerful motivator, a fragile hope in the face of such widespread despair. Their immediate priority, after stabilizing the cub, was to get it to a safer, more stable environment. The village, still reeling from the earthquake, was no place for a recovering animal, nor for the tense vigil they needed to keep. John, ever practical, pointed towards a small, relatively intact outbuilding on the edge of the village, a storage shed that had miraculously withstood the tremor. It wasn't perfect, but it offered shelter and a degree of quiet. Evelyn cradled the cub close, shielding its eyes from the harsh afternoon light as they carefully navigated the treacherous terrain of displaced rubble and splintered wood. Every step was deliberate, every movement gentle, as if the entire world might shatter if they moved too quickly. With each passing moment, each careful act of nurture, Evelyn's bond with the tiny creature solidified. She felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness, a profound sense of responsibility for this small life she had literally pulled from the brink. Its warmth, even through the blanket, was a comfort in the desolate landscape. She spoke to it in soft whispers, reassuring words, even though she knew it couldn't understand, but perhaps could feel the calm in her voice. This wasn't just a research subject anymore. It was a living, breathing testament to resilience, a fragile miracle. John watched Evelyn with a quiet intensity. He had seen countless acts of heroism, faced unimaginable suffering, but there was something unique about this moment. The pure, unadulterated dedication Evelyn showed for this wild creature, the way her eyes held a fierce, protective love, resonated deeply within him. He had always focused on human survival, on the immediate need for human connection and rescue. But observing Evelyn, seeing the cub's vulnerability and the immense effort to save it, carved a new understanding within him. It wasn't just about saving a life. It was about acknowledging the inherent value of all life, about extending compassion beyond his usual boundaries. He recognized a profound truth in her actions. Sometimes, saving the smallest, most unexpected life could ignite a spark of hope far larger than itself. Then, Marcus returned, his face etched with a mixture of weariness and quiet triumph. "She's nearby," he reported, his voice low but firm. "About a kilometer out, watching from the ridge. She's been circling, drawn by the scent but still wary of the commotion. She's injured, a gash on her leg, but she's moving. She hasn't given up on her cub." His words brought a fresh wave of hope, a tangible possibility that this heart-wrenching saga might yet have a joyous conclusion. The mother was hurt, yes, but she was there, a shadow in the distance, a vigilant presence, a silent promise of reunion. Evelyn, with Marcus's steady hand on her shoulder, carefully placed the fragile cub onto a makeshift bed of soft leaves and dry grass in a secluded hollow, near where Marcus had last seen the mother leopard. The spot was strategically chosen, sheltered from prying eyes, yet open enough for the mother to easily approach. They retreated silently, melting back into the shadows of the scattered acacia trees, their eyes fixed on the small, unmoving form of the cub. The afternoon sun, now dipping towards the horizon, cast long, hesitant shadows, adding to the palpable tension. The wait was agonizing, each passing minute stretching into an eternity. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of nervous anticipation. She kept one hand pressed to her chest, as if to calm its frantic rhythm. Marcus, ever watchful, scanned the surrounding scrub with an intensity that spoke volumes of his concern. John stood a little apart, his arms crossed, his gaze alternating between the hollow and the distant landscape, a silent sentinel sharing their hope and apprehension. The world seemed to hold its breath, every rustle of dry leaves, every distant bird call, magnified in the profound stillness. Suddenly, a flicker of movement, a tawny shadow detaching itself from the deeper gloom of the undergrowth. The mother leopard. She emerged slowly, cautiously, a specter of raw instinct and primal fear. Her movements were fluid, silent, yet imbued with a palpable hesitancy. She was wary, her usually piercing eyes narrowed, scanning their hiding place, her senses on high alert for any lingering threat. Evelyn could see the scars of her own recent ordeal, a fresh gash on her shoulder, a slight list to her gait. The earthquake had taken its toll on her, too. The mother paused at the edge of the hollow, a mere few feet from her cub, her powerful body tensed, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest, a warning to the unseen dangers she perceived. Her instincts screamed caution, yet an even more powerful force, the unyielding bond of motherhood, pulled her forward. She lowered her head, sniffing the air, her nose twitching, confirming the familiar, precious scent of her offspring. It was a battle fought in silent, tense moments, fear against love, survival against instinct, then a miracle. As if receiving an unspoken command, the mother leopard took a tentative step, then another. Her gaze softened imperceptibly as it fell upon the small, still form. She nudged her cub gently with her nose, a soft, almost tender gesture. The cub, which had been so lifeless, stirred. A tiny, almost imperceptible sound escaped it. A weak but unmistakable purr, a fragile testament to life, to recognition, to home. It was a sound that pierced the silence, a melody of pure, unadulterated relief that brought tears to Evelyn's eyes. The mother licked her cub, a slow, deliberate motion, enveloping it in her protective aura. The bond, fractured by chaos, was slowly, beautifully reforming. As the mother settled, curling her body protectively around her cub, a profound sense of peace descended upon Evelyn, Marcus, and John. The image of the reunited leopard family, nestled together in the fading light, became a powerful symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of nature to heal and persevere, even in the face of the most catastrophic events, whether natural or man-made. It was a stark reminder that every life holds intrinsic value, that empathy transcends species, and that the interconnectedness of all living things demands our respect and protection. This small victory, against overwhelming odds, reinforced Evelyn's unwavering belief in the importance of conservation, reminding them all that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple outwards, creating hope where darkness once reigned. The journey was far from over for this land, for its people, and for its magnificent creatures. But in that moment, witnessing the quiet reunion, they knew that hope, fragile yet persistent, had been cradled and reborn. If you were moved by this story of survival and compassion, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that celebrate the wild and remind us of our collective responsibility to protect it. Stay tuned for more incredible tales of empathy and endurance in the animal kingdom.